We are here again, each and every week, 65th episode, 65 weeks of doing great program in New York City. And I must say today is a very beautiful, warm day. I was walking my dogs and thinking about old school memories, because that's what I do normally when it comes to Wednesdays. And sometimes I'm thinking about things that are future coming up in front. But this time I cleared the air with the sun in my hair and my dog's pulling me around town looking for squirrels. I said, you know what? I got to think about some of the good times we had back in the golden era of the 90s and into the 2000s. And when I say that golden era, I say it so dramatic, the golden era of the 1990s. But on the grander scale, as I was talking to this gentleman on the side before we started there was no digital cameras yet or digital phones when we were doing these things back then. And that's why it's so priceless when we get someone that actually has pictures and has memories to share of an era that was just so wonderful, because it was just something that was beginning. Henceforth is why I asked our friend Pedro Mondesir from Toronto to come on to True House Stories, which I'm going to bring it up in a second. And he's responsible as a promoter and helping to create a scene in Toronto, very soulful house scene, bringing international DJs along with the Canadian DJs that supported the American house music sound, and some of the Canadian guys who produced some great records that I also supported as a DJ as well. But for now, I will say, I want to welcome to the stage. I hope he's ready. He's been in hair and makeup for an hour and taking care of the lighting and all. We like to bring up to True House Stories, a friend of ours from the dance music community, Pedro Mondesir, Garage 416, baby, what's up?
Good to see you again. It's been a very, very, very long time. Yeah, so hair and makeup was keeping me busy.
And he's been busy working on his brands and telling us all about life. But before I begin asking any questions, everybody around the world always likes to hear how those that are involved in the lockdown, been out of lockdown now, how you've handled COVID and how it affected your area. Can you share some light on that for us, brother?
Yes, I can definitely do that. I'm getting a little bit of an echo on my side. I think it's good now, Lenny, so that's good. Check your Instagram. I actually added a request to join so we can stream live together as well. But COVID was tough, right? So it hit our community very, very difficult. It was tough. I'm up in Toronto, Canada. We've been very, very strict with the health measures. We continue to be very strict with health measures, and it was a 100% complete shutdown, and it was 100% shutdown for a very, very long time in Toronto. So it was tough, but things started to reemerge just recently, so that's fantastic. But we're still at a limited capacity, so we're only permitted 25% capacity right now, which I still chose. Some promoters decided to step back and wait. I've chose to do a couple of events, and it's it's been fantastic. And one of the things is that the party pops off right away because people are eager to get back on the dance floor and hear good music and join people. So even though it's at a reduced capacity, we're still blessed and still really happy to get people together.
And that's important, to be honest. Having the chance to have people like in a church gather. And these types of events become almost like church in a way.
Yeah, a community is important. Gathering of people and souls and bodies and those that have common interests. It's important, right? We are social beings, and I think it's part of our mental health. spiritual health, to get people together, and provided that it's safe and so forth. And I do respect that. And so really happy that things are starting to reemerge. And very soon in Toronto, the rumor has it that we will be opening up soon to 100%. Our vaccination rates are very, very high. Specifically in the province of Ontario, we're over 80% double vaxxed. So very, very high percentage. And so that's a promising sign that things will be able to reopen closer to a normal state as possible.
That's really cool. Can you check on your phone if you're getting an echo? I mean, you may have to put your volume down because I'm hearing an echo come back.
Okay, no problem.
On your
Yeah. I get that too. Sorry about that. So I may disconnect from you. And so muted here.
So again, it's a pleasure having you on. And I wanted to start with, how I ask everyone, how does music find you, Pedro, as a young kid? There's always a starting point. We all didn't just come into this magically. We all find our way, or it finds you. Can you take us through that journey?
Well, if you want to actually start as a kid, I mean, I guess some of the early memories that I do have as a kid is a big influence was, first of all, my parents. Music was a big part of our upbringing. My mother is Spanish. My father is St. Lucian. So it was not unusual as a little kid being dragged from event to event and West Indian party to West Indian party as a kid. And listening to like calypso and soca music, and it was just part of our lives and social environments. As I got a little bit older, my brothers who were older than me, they're 9 years older. I have one brother 9 years older and another brother 10 years older. My brother Carlos is 11 years older. Sorry. They were big into music and buying records. I mean, that's all there was back then is records. And as the little brother, they always said, "Don't go in my room and don't touch my stuff and don't touch my records." But of course, I'm not listening to that, right? So I'm going in and I'm shuffling through very daintily when they're not home. I actually sneaked in and went through all the records and played it. And there was a lot of old rock music, like Rolling Stones, Joe Cocker, like things like Supertramp, to like new wave stuff, to like the Kinks and like some punk stuff and Clash, Big Audio, Dynamite, and like Kate Bush, who still is one of my favorite artists up to today. And just really, I was alone in my brother's room. I felt like I'm doing something wrong, and just listening to music. And that really impacted me. And as I got older into my teen years, my oldest brother Carlos said, "Hey, listen, I know you're underage, but listen, I want to take you to this party." And I was really, loved going down in the core of the city. I grew up, I was born and raised and lived all my life in Toronto, but he just kind of said, "Okay, let's go. And I can get you into some of these after hour parties," which was prevalent in Toronto at the time, because our last call at that time was 1 a.m. It's since changed, but it was 1 a.m. So there was a large culture of after hours parties because people were still interested in partying afterwards. And they were straight up like speakeasy styles, like slit in the door, or what are you doing? Like, what do you want? Like, it was really on the down low back in like the late 80s, early 90s. And I remember it was one particular party. It was called Cola in Toronto. And we went there, and when it opened the door, and let me get back to, because some of the younger viewers may not appreciate this, that there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no social media, there was no way to be able to experience something before it actually happened. So, which was, I think, part of the magic back then. So there was no concept of what to expect. So, and when they opened the door, and I saw, the host was there, and it was a drag queen, which was amazing for me to see at that time, and it was so cool, and just dressed up like from head to toe, interesting, and then opening up to the music that I felt in my chest, and the lights and the sound and the diversity of the crowd. There were straight people, gay people, white people, black people, Asian people, and just a whole different mishmashing of people. And I felt like Alice going through the rabbit hole at that point. And for me, that was a very defining time of my teenage years and my late teenage years. And from then on, it took a hold of me, and it's never let go since then. So that's basically a little snippet of some of the diverse influences as a kid, going into my teenage years, and kind of how I stumbled into this. But still, big influences, from my parents and of course my older brothers, most definitely.
So your brothers definitely the ones that put the bug on you. Now, mind you, back in those days, you talk with your friends too, that you were going to school with and stuff. I guess those would be the ones that be like, yo, what these parties, because everybody wanted to meet somebody. That was another thing of what the push was to go out back then. Let's be fair.
I was very fortunate that my brother Carlos was very well immersed in the scene then, and so I had an advantage of being his little brother, right? Being his baby brother at that point. So I had that privilege of getting to know which parties there were. But back then, once again, no social media. This is where, and that was the very first party. They said, "What's your name? What's your phone number? And we're going to add you on our book, and we'll invite you to other parties." This is how I got influenced, and this is when I was promoting back in the day. And I'm sure we'll get in there. It's just how promoters used to hustle. They took
so wait. So you would get a mailer at the house, right? A postcard of a party coming up, right? Because that's how I remember. You used to get membership.
I would actually get a phone call, and I was living with my parents. I'd get a phone call at my parents' home. And once again, we had no answering machines. And I'd have my father say, in his deep voice, saying, "Somebody called." And I said, "Oh, okay, who called?" "Somebody called to invite you to some party." And I was like, "What did they say? Where was it? What's going on? Give me." He goes, "I don't know, some party." And I'm going, "That's no good. That's no good." Right? I don't have Google. I can't look this up. And I was the first of my friends that got immersed in the scene because I was so young. That I was the one that was telling my friends, "Hey, listen, you gotta check out this party." So I'd call my brother and find out, "Listen, I got this call." First of all, I was just so privileged. I got this call, and I got an invitation to go to this event. Please find out what it is or where it's from. And inevitably he would do that and pass me the information. And and I just, it was like crack. I got a taste of it, and I got hooked. And I was, from then on in, I was like party to party, and coming home at 6 a.m. and partying all night long. And it was an amazing experience back then. Amazing.
Do you remember the DJs that were around at that time up in that area that were making the impact with everybody, like the main players?
Oh, I could definitely speak those that really influenced me back in the day. Dino and Terry, most definitely. They also ran a label called Crash Records back in the day. Still DJing up to today. They just DJ'd a party last week. They were a huge influence. Peter and Tyrone. Back then it was Peter, Tyrone, and Shams, but huge influence as well. They did a lot of the after hours parties. Big influence for me. And Peter and Tyrone also ran the label 83 West. So people out there may have some of their records. But other artists by the name of Mitch Winthrop, big influence. Dave Campbell, who I still work with today, at another one of my events called Break for Love and as well as a summer patio party I do called Hot Supper Sundays. Huge influence as well. So many, but I mean, those for me personally were the most influential ones. There's other DJs called D Nice, and even back in the day, Tricky Morera, the SoundQuest crew. There was so many excellent DJs back then, and many of them are still around today, DJing today as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing that the career can still keep you going generation and decades later. It's
absolutely, yeah.
Because there was a time.
They were just kids when they started.
That's right. There was a time when a lot of us came up, and we would call them the first generation DJs in the 70s were gone. They either got married, died of drug overdoses, HIV, a lot of things. And then there was this big void in between. The 80s came and things were kind of happening, but there was no the disco era. Then later on, we'll talk about where house music starts for you, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But during that time you were going out, do you remember the style of music that was being played at these venues by these DJs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so house music was definitely being played at those parties. And that was when house was, really starting out, and when you look at production and those producers out there, it wasn't much more than a little keyboard and a few tracks back then. But definitely house music, but it was a lot more diverse musically there. But that after I was seeing a lot of house music, a lot of that kind of rare groove, some of the disco tracks, the acid jazz tracks, even some from back in the day. But it was very different than it is now, because it wasn't so much pigeonholed as one style of music. It was just dance music, all forms of dance music being played. So if you're able to dance to it, whether it be an R&B kind of track, a house music track, a hip hop track, whatever it may be, and if people can groove and dance to it, it was played, and that's why even up to today we have different brand parties. And even though I have a strong affinity to house music, our branded parties play more than just house music, because I don't like saying I'm just a house music lover. I'm a music lover. I listen to all forms of music. And I think that's really helped me, because that's also exposed me to so many different scenes within Toronto. And then when I was able to travel, going to New York and Miami, where we hung out in Miami together, and to Europe and so forth, and then experiencing these different scenes, it's for me, the diversity of music and being able to groove to music, regardless of the genre, is something I truly appreciate.
And that's important, because you remember, everyone, he's a promoter. He has to see past, there's a difference between the DJ and the promoter, and remember, now he's finding his way amongst what he's seeing around him from different parties, because that's what happens. It's artistically, your mind is like a tape recorder. It's seeing everything. It's, okay, you're going out in those days. Did you really know that you wanted to do this thing, promote and throw these type of parties, or you were just finding, what this was about? Because a lot of times people don't really know they're getting into this yet,
There was no intention of becoming a promoter at all. Zero intention of it at all. I was just there as a pure fan, a pure music lover, someone on the dance floor. And that was it. I was always blessed to have a very strong social network ever since I was a very young age. So I've always had an amazing group of friends around me. And I was kind of that guy that would be able to get people together in a social environment. I mean, the very first party I did, and this had nothing to do with basically the scene I had, was just an 18th birthday party where I actually did a flyer and had people down and actually rented a little hall. But I didn't think about it as promoting. I just wanted to get people together as a party. And then it was just hundreds of people showed up, hundreds of 18-year-old kids showed up, where it was overwhelming at that point. But I was like, hey, that was fun, and just parked it from there. But no, so to answer your question initially, it had nothing to do with promoting. It had nothing to say, oh, I think I can get into that, or I can do something. I was just there having fun. And just grooving like everybody else was on the dance floor. So the being delivered to the crowd was a massive influence to me. And what was that exposure? And that outlet was that DJ behind those ones and twos.
Right. Everybody was playing, and don't forget everybody was playing vinyl records still. Wasn't digital yet.
Vinyl. Yeah. Nothing digital. No. There was no digital. It was purely analog, right? It was all vinyl back then. So and I still have an affinity to vinyl today. I still play every Friday night on Twitch. I just do vinyl sets just because once again, I have an attachment to vinyl. I love the tangibility of it.
Yeah, no, I know. And there's a nostalgia to it as well now. It's like now it's becoming the in thing again the last couple of years. Like, the DJ's playing an all vinyl set. So there's
yeah.
Wait. Those sync button? What? No pre-mix thing? No. It's like all of a sudden it's avant-garde. The guy's playing vinyl records this week. Oh, very nice. That was normal back then to play a whole night with vinyl.
It wasn't normal. There was no other medium. That was it. So you have to go to the record store, get those records. And in Toronto, it was Play a Record and Tracks, and there's many other amazing record stores back then. And you'd have to pick up that vinyl, right? And there were those guys there from earlier on, like the DJs I mentioned, like the Dino and Terrys, like the Peter Tyrones and Shems, that they got that music before the general public did, and they would break it on the dance floor. And I just remember, so many times where I just stopped and said, what the hell is this? This is just amazing, because the sound was very new at the time. And yeah, it made a real effect on me. It really affected me in a great way.
Yeah, well, I know that because I worked with you. And I know you taste the music. I know you taste the DJs. I know that you like the underground house sound. Provided, of course, I know you do other sounds, but I do know you like the underground soulful house thing that was prevalent at that time.
Very much so.
Okay, so take us to your first ever party that you put out, because we want to hear that, what it's like, the stress of preparing to do this for the first time, what that must have been like for you.
Well, I'll have to bring my brother into it because he was older than I was, so he got pulled into it before I got pulled into it, and just for the sake that we're joined by the hip, we did it together. So he was initially invited to host an event at a legendary club in downtown Toronto called El Macombo. El Macombo was a live venue. Big rock and roll stars have performed. The Rolling Stones have performed there. Huge stars have performed there. And it was a Sunday party where they said, hey, let's do this kind of live and DJ combo. Back then was, wow, you're combining two different elements of DJing and performing live. That's very different. Today it's not unusual. But back then, we're going back to 95 is, it was different. So that was called Soul Sundays. And we had zero experience in doing anything live, knowing anything technically. But they had an in-house booker there. And he said, don't worry, I'll work with me and we'll teach you. We just, we kind of appreciate that you're kind of in this different kind of scene, and we just really appreciate, that you like certain styles of music, and we think we could really benefit from that. So we did it. How was it? Well, let's put it this way. So it was in the middle of June, and it was scorching hot, it was an upstairs venue with very little ventilation. It fell on Father's Day, which we didn't have the foresight of planning very well. And so, was it the most memorable event? No, because it was hot. It was uncomfortable. It was Father's Day, so not all the people. That wasn't a wise thing to launch their first party on a Father's Day. And people came out, but I'm going, oh my God, it was the most stressful thing. And I just remember being there and going, you don't know what's going on. You don't know how to manage things. You don't know how to organize things. And it was initiation by fire, because there wasn't a lot that you can learn from or see or experience, because it's not like I can go and learn from a lot of other things, because back then there wasn't a lot to choose from or to be exposed to in Toronto to be able to learn. There was some big infamous nightclubs that were just amazing. But I mean, this was something different than just doing like a nightclub kind of event. This was more of like a live venue / DJ kind of event. So that was the very, very first one that we did under that Hot Stepper, which is the whole umbrella company's Hot Stepper Productions, under the Hot Stepper Productions banner. And we learned a lot from there. And we grew a lot from there. But that was the very first one. So would we have done it that way again? Definitely not. We'd have definitely started different. But hindsight is 20/20, right? You learn, you live and learn.
Well, you don't know that until you do it to say, I will never do that again. Because, you could have had opposite situation. You don't know what you don't know. Even though it was scorching hot, you could have been packed to the rafters, burning the place down. And you'd have been like, well, we went against all the odds, and now we wound up having a phenomenal night,
Yeah. And it wasn't a bad night. It was a fun night, and it was a great gathering of friends. But I mean, I don't think it was as expected. And believe me, there was some disco sweat coming down from the rafters, just because the humidity was just intolerable, if you could imagine. So it was we look back on it now and kind of laugh, but it was more at that time, I think it was more stressful than anything else. But we made the best from it, and we kind of, you really had to earn your stripes back then. It wasn't easy. Yeah. It was tough. It was a tough.
Now the clubs up there in Toronto have the same like here in down, in our part of America, United States. In New York, for example, we have a lot of places that wanted bar guarantees to be able to give the promoter to take over the room, but also in the situation that you had to have a certain amount of money coming to that bar to cover your expenses. Is that the same up there?
Yeah, very much so. Now, I'm privileged to the fact that I happen to have some positive relationships with some venue owners, and that we have a well-established following where the risk is not as great for them. So that doesn't apply often for myself individually, but that's very, very common. And because the way they look at it, and I've been on the other side, and I appreciate it. That's the business side of it. And so yeah, if you're new and you're upcoming, you better have some dollars ready to be able to back yourself up with. So it's tougher. It's just, I just have that privilege. It's that we've been around this long, and we kind of have a reputation. And I'm fortunate to say that we don't actually have a lot of parties that don't turn out well.
So back to your original part, if I remember correctly, you were talking about when you went out, you'd have door personality come up to you and say, can I have your details? So in the beginning, I'm presuming that you would have to start to have people gather mailing lists from your patrons. How do you go and find patrons to come to your clubs? People don't really know that nowadays. They know it from a Facebook ad going out. But back then, things were word of mouth, hand to foot. There's a lot of legwork that went in. It's just not just a party. You got a lot of things behind the scenes.
Social media, angle.
In the sense you have to, really work to make that party work for those 7 or 10 hours that you're putting that party on. It's months of, if it's, you know, it's months of
Yeah,
planning. Yeah.
yeah, especially back then. So yeah, like so you touched on it. So learned Garage 416 was a great experience for me because that really moved our promotion to another level where I started booking international acts, and then there's a lot of people don't see the behind the scenes and the amount of work, like in work permits and all that processing. But before we even got there, you got to make sure you get the following. So yeah, it's literally capturing information. This is before the social media age that we live in today. So it's literally, give me your name, give me your phone number. I will invite you, because things were also back then a lot more exclusive. So as today, if you have something you want to blast it out to as many people that can get exposed to, then it was very much more exclusive, and it was very cool to be in the know. So it was very important to have tips, right, that are coming in that can short and influence. But getting those phone numbers, because it's great to have a group of your friends and their friends, but to get a substantial size party, you often need a lot more than just a good group of a few friends that are coming out there. And that's where the legwork and the grind comes in, and where people don't see. It's like literally pounding the pavement with flyers, going to other parties that that are like parties, and standing there at the end of the night saying, come to my party, come to my party. People take a flyer, chuck it away. I'm going to hand out 1,000 flyers, but you know what, if I get 10%, 5%, 10%, that's a win. And then calling people on the weekends saying, hey, I'm so I'm Pedro. I'm calling from Hot Supper Productions, and I'm calling to invite you to come down to my party. Here's the details. It's at this venue. Here's the cover charge. Bring some friends down. And I think what the difference is then.
Please search for part 2 of this podcast on the platform you're watching or listening to. And please do not forget to follow us.